So before we got too far into the video, I wanted to do a little bit of a backstory because we are sort of starting this resurrection in the middle of it. So here's a little bit of context for it. Like many, an old Corolla is my dream car, especially when it popped up locally, and it's a Southern chassis that's supposed to be rust-free, at least for the most part. I jumped on the opportunity to buy it. What I was sold on was all of the parts were there, especially for the 20 valve swap, to put the car together and be able to drive it. When I originally picked the car up, it was nothing more than an empty engine bay, and the interior was filled with a bunch of different pieces and parts. Now, in retrospect, none of that was true. The engine block was there, but I needed to sink a ton of money into it to put it together, to have it drive and be assembled, mechanically at least, the right way. And I'm not too upset about that because I did get to put the car together mechanically the way that I would want it together. And to make a long story short and not draw this out, I drove it around for a couple years. I came home, parked it one night, woke up the next morning, and there was a huge crack in the windshield. So I had a glass company come out, and they could see a little bit of rust poking through between where the windshield and the dashboard meet. And that really spiraled into, well, I guess it's time to fix all of this. The first thing that needs to happen, the car needs to get on jack stands and the wheels removed because we are going to be doing a lot of welding and body work, so it's going to be nice to be able to access both the rocker panels and the wheel arches. But before we get to any of that, we need to address the main rust issue on this, and that's going to be between the windshield and the dashboard. And for us to address that issue, not only does the windshield have to get removed, but so does the dashboard and everything pertaining to it. Once the windshield was out, we sort of got an idea on what we were going to be battling ahead as far as the rust goes, because up until this point, we could only really get a little bit of a glimpse on what was behind the windshield and the dashboard. The following day, we spent removing the dashboard itself. Now, even though I've had the entire dashboard out of this before, I did buy it in a box of parts, and I'm not entirely sure if all the right hardware was used, and there's definitely some hardware missing. As we go through this build and sort of restore those pieces, I'm going to try and locate the right hardware and make this thing whole. Now, one thing we have to consider with the entire build is, at the end of the day, it's still a 41-year Corolla, and the interior is made out of incredibly brittle plastic. Now, it may not have been that brittle when it was new, but after 40 plus years and thousands of heat cycles, yeah, things are going to get a little brittle. So we just have to take a little bit of precaution when removing everything. I will say, if you do have an older car with brittle interior, it's best to do it on a really hot day during the summer, because when the plastic is cold, it's more brittle and prone to break, but when it's really hot and warm out, the plastic usually tends to bend more, and it's a lot easier to get out then. Here you're seeing me remove this little DIY gauge pod that I made, utilizing the factory radio trim piece. At the time, it was a quick modification, and I'm really proud of it. It worked really well, and it looked pretty good in the car, but I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to keep it. After successfully removing our incredibly cracked dashboard that we'll deal with later, we did a little bit of vacuuming around the car just because we are going to be starting to cut here soon and there's going to be sparks flying. I really don't want anything catching fire. Also, I'm pretty sure this is a rat's nest. From this point on, the next thing to do is to drop this factory wiring that's behind the dashboard, as well as get rid of this sound deadening material that's against the firewall, and we'll start making our way towards cutting this rust out. Now I do want to replace this sound deadening with more of a cleaner stick-on style, so if anybody has any recommendations on a specific brand to go after, leave me a comment below. I'd really appreciate it. Now that we have full access to both the front and the back side of the panels that are rusted, we're going to do our best to cut out all of the rust and then fabricate some new panels that are going to replace it. So when it comes to cutting out the panels, having a visibly clean line to cut against is going to make my life a lot easier, and all I'm using for that is just some generic masking tape to mark off the area that I want to cut out. The benefit to using the masking tape is it creates a nice straight line, so when you transfer your template over to the metal and you're cutting it out, it's much easier to cut a straight line out of metal than something that's got some dips or divots in it. Making the replacement panel itself can be a little bit tricky, so what I figured out is just holding a piece of cardstock over the hole and then using a pencil on the inside to trace that hole out. This can easily be cut out with a pair of scissors, and then the shape can be transferred over to the new sheet metal by just tracing it with a Sharpie. Now, this might look a little funny to you, but we do run our business in this garage, so space is pretty limited, and we don't have anywhere for this vise to permanently mount. Come down. And we just repeated the exact same process that we did for the driver's side for everything on the passenger side. After I had both sides fitting nice, the following night my good friend Trevor came over to help me get these panels permanently in place. And while neither one of us exactly work in the auto body industry, Trevor is a welder by trade and would like to someday work in the fabrication field, so we both figured that this would be a really good opportunity for him to add a little bit of experience to his portfolio. I just want to say thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video. I would love to hear your thoughts on how we've done so far and any suggestions for the build going forward down in the comments. There's obviously a ton more work that we have to do, and I can't thank my buddy Trevor enough for coming over and making some magic happen. We'll see you guys in the next video.